Hello and welcome to another post-processing tutorial, and today is a little premiere for me. It's no post-processing tutorial for photos. I'm actually doing my first video editing tutorial, and it's not very fancy. I'm just showing you the, for me, easiest way to create a time-lapse including some motion. And for this I want to show you as an example how to create an Instagram story which you could use to teaser a photo which you've uploaded. And this Instagram story will include some motion time-lapse, and I'll just show you what I'm talking about by showing you the final example. So let's just play this quickly. So this video here, it's in vertical format, just as you would use for an Instagram story. And it's a time-lapse, you have some motion in it, and at the end I'll present the photo and you have a little text. So this could be used together with a photo to create a little bit more views. And let's just close this. I'll now show you how to create such a time-lapse, and I'll be using Davinci Resolve. And if you don't know Davinci Resolve, it's a very good video editing software which you can actually download for free. So it's a software you can compare in terms of functionality with Adobe Premiere, and you don't have to pay for it. So there's a free version which has a whole set of features, and I use it for all my vlogs since I'd say half a year now, and I really like it. And when it comes to time lapses, I found that this software is maybe the easiest way to create a time-lapse, at least for me. So I've played around with Photoshop and some other tools, but if you want to have some motion in it and stuff like that, Davinci Resolve is very easy to use, and that's what I'm showing you today. So you don't need to know all your way around Davinci Resolve. There are lots of tutorials on YouTube which you can check out, but today I'll just focus on how to create a time-lapse. And in order to edit a time-lapse, you actually need a sequence of photos which you can use. And what I currently try to do more often is, before I take the final photo for my portfolio, I take a sequence of photos which I could use for a time-lapse, and this way create some presentation for the photo to use, for example in an Instagram story. So what I did here, I used the interval setting on my 5DSR to create a photo every 5 seconds, and I took 99 photos. And for every modern camera I think you'll find such a setting, and maybe I do a tutorial on this, but this tutorial will be about the processing. So if you want to find out how to create such a sequence, I'm sure you'll find some tutorials now, and I'll soon also do a tutorial on this. But actually here I have 99 photos which are already converted to JPEG. So I shot raw photos and then I just did normal Lightroom processing, so doing some contrast, color adjustments, then exported all the photos into JPEGs, put them into a folder. And the important thing, or the only important thing now, is that those JPEGs have a continuous numbering. So it's a sequence, and if the numbers count through here, Davinci Resolve will automatically recognize this as a time-lapse sequence. And this is what makes the whole process very easy. So let's head over to Davinci Resolve now, and I show you how to create the time-lapse. So here in this main panel, we just create a new project, and you see I'm using Davinci Resolve 14 still. The current version you can download is 15, but since I'm using Windows 7, I have to stick with 14. But the settings I show you will be the same. So I create a new project, Instagram time-lapse, and the first thing I'll do is go to settings, and here the resolution, I set this to 1080 with this 1920 to get a vertical frame for Instagram. I'll leave the frame rate at 24, which is my default, and which is good for cinematic videos. I'll just save that, and that's it for now. The next thing I need to do is to import the time-lapse, and for this, down here you'll find the media tab, which you can use to import media into your project. And I'll not go into all the details of Davinci Resolve. As I said, there are lots of tutorials. We're now focused on what is needed to edit a time-lapse. So bear with me. We go to Media, and then we head over to the folder which contains all the time-lapse images. And where do I have it? I have this in this DSLR time-lapse folder. And what you see if I open this folder, you don't see 99 files. You just see one, and this is why Davinci Resolve already recognized the numbered files as a continuous sequence and made one file of it. And I just drag and drop it down here. Now if I go back to the Edit tab, I see this file up here in my master bin, and I can drag it to the timeline. And now it's resized to fit the width, but we'll change this. There's one thing we need to do first to be able to edit this, because currently it will play very slowly, and especially as I'm recording video. And yeah, that's a general problem with Davinci Resolve. It's very resource hungry. But there's an easy remedy, and for this we'll first go to Settings again and scroll down a little bit, and down here under Optimize Media, I'll change the resolution to a quarter, which for my PC is sufficient. And I save this. And now when I right click on this file here in the master bin and go to Generate Optimized Media, what Davinci will do is will pre-process, decode the video, and create a quarter resolution file of decoded video material, which will then be used in the editing, and this will greatly speed up the processing. So now if I play back the video, you'll see it will play back smoothly. The next thing I want to do is, as you know, an Instagram story has a length of 15 seconds, and since I only took 100 frames at 24 frames a second, this gives me just a little over 4 seconds of time lapse. But what I can do, and what's normally no problem, is if I click on this clip, and let's actually make this a little wider, I can right click on it, and you'll find here the change clip speed setting. And for a time lapse, this, especially for a static time lapse like this here, you can actually reduce the speed to get the time you want here. For example, if I reduce it to like 30%, this gives me 9 seconds, and I'll target like 11 seconds because then I can also fit in the photo at the end. And what I now do, I click this ripple sequence, which will make this wider. I set it to change, and what we now have, we have some spacing between the frames, because now we just have like I don't know, less than half, so maybe 10 frames a second. But to get back to 24, Davinci needs to do some interpolation, and for this you go down here and find the right retime and scaling, and you set this to optical flow, and this will do a very good job here for interpolation. So the time lapse will be a little bit slower than I did. So if I want to do it really right in the field, I'll just take more photos and let the time lapse run longer. But for this here, it's okay to stretch it a bit. And now let's play it back again. You see it's now a little slower, but I think this is actually looking quite nice. Before it was a little bit too fast, and now I think the motion in the clouds is better. Let's just make it a little larger for you to see. So by just reducing the speed of the time lapse and adding some interpolation, I get a very smooth time lapse here. Okay, so the next thing is we need to resize this. And for this, on the right side, you have this inspector, and you have this transform panel where you can just zoom in and zoom out. But what you can also do, you can just click down here on the transform tool, and then you can just use this to transform the time lapse just as you want. And I zoom out a bit using the mouse wheel, and I start, and this is what I want to do. I want to create a little motion time lapse. I start zoomed in quite a bit, and I also reposition it so we're basically starting up here at the mountains. And what I want to do, what is my goal for this time-lapse, I want to, let's redo this. So I want to have a little motion along this river. So first going to this side and then going down here. So some curvy motion for the time-lapse. This is what you saw in the beginning. And you can do this very easily in Davinci. So I go to the beginning here, and on the right side here in the transform tool, I click on this little marker here, and I do this for zoom and position. And what this does, it creates a keyframe. Now I go to the middle of the time-lapse and click again on those markers, which creates another keyframe. And what I can now do, I move this over a bit, and I also zoom out a little bit. And if we now play this back, what you see, the time-lapse moves. And now, after being at the middle, I go to the end and create another keyframe. And now I move it back in this direction. And also zoom out a little bit more. Let's zoom in so you better see it. So I have kind of a zigzag motion. And this will be currently very abrupt. So to smooth this out, you can actually click on such a marker here and select smooth. And now we have a nice curve which will describe the movement. So now let's play this back. And you'll see now again it's stuttery. And why is it stuttery? Because now it's not enough to have the optimized media. Now that we did some transformations, we also need to cache this result. And for this, you right click on this file, go to render cache clip source and set this to on. And then you have to go to playback render cache user. And I know this is all a lot, but you just have to do those steps. So you don't yet have to understand them. What he now does, playing it through a few times, you see this blue line here, he caches the clip, and I have to do it a couple of times and then it will play smoothly and we can see the final time lapse. So let's do one more iteration. Now you see how it moves. And now here comes the curve and we go to the foreground. And yeah, this is very nice and smoothly. And actually it was very easy to create. If I just wanted this time-lapse, I could now export it. But we still want to do a little bit more and add the photo at the end. And this will be the next step. So in order to add the photo, I first need to get the photo into this master bin again. And so I go to the media tab. And again, in the same folder where I had the time-lapse, I also have this mountain gloom image here, which you're gonna drag down. And I've prepared this in Photoshop, so it's already resized for web. It has a little framing, so it will look nice. And yeah, just drag and drop it onto the timeline, and I'll drop it onto a separate video track here, so I can do some little cross-fading here. So fade in of such a video or image you can just do by clicking on this little marker here. So if you hover over clip, on the side of the clips, those little white markers will appear. You can just click down and drag it in, and this will ramp the opacity. And I'll do the same down here for the time lapse, but in the other direction. So I basically have a fade out of the time lapse and a slow fade in of this image. And I want to move it a little bit, so the fade in should start just before the fade out is finished. So like this. So we see a little bit of a crossfade, but not too much. And as with the time lapse, I have to resize this image again. So let me just use the transform tool here and click down and drag. And what I want to do, again, I want to have some little zoom effect. So I go to the beginning of the image clip, add a marker, and now I go to the end and let's just see, we're at 15.19, so let's first trim this to 15 seconds so it fits into the Instagram story. So I'll just drag it over to fit here, so we have exactly 15 seconds. And now I'm gonna add another keyframe here for the image clip, and I zoom it in a little bit more, so just close to the edges. So if I play this, you see that it slowly fades in. And yeah, this actually looks quite nice. So let's play this from the beginning. So we have the time lapse with the movement, which we created before. And once we arrive here at the bottom, it fades out and the image fades in. And yeah, what I forgot to mention is, so we did a little bit of resizing both to the time lapse and to the image, and in order to be able to do so, we have to make sure that the source material is large enough. So we can always resize, but if we have source material which is smaller than the size we're targeting, then we need to do some interpolation and the quality will suffer. So this is why, for example, my time-lapse images, I think I resized them to 6500 versus 4200 pixels. And also this image here is big enough so I can zoom in very much and don't lose any quality. So that's important. Always start with source material which is big enough to be able to do some transformations. There are two more things I want to do now before I export the video, and this is adding some sound and also adding the text. So let's first go back to the media tab, and I've already placed some atmospheric sound here in this bin and I drag it down. It's some wind sound which I downloaded from the internet. It's part of Peter McKinnon's sound pack which I purchased. And also down here I have a little video file which is the animated text, and I also drag it down. So let's go back to the edit tab and start with the audio. So down here, up here, this Arctic winds, I just drag it down and I drag it down here to the audio track. What I then do, I'll trim it, so just pulling it over so it also is exactly 15 seconds long. I'll create a little fade in of the audio. And also what you can do for audio, if you click on this marker in the middle, you can change the way it fades in, and I usually go with a little fade here which starts slower and gets faster at the end, and I do the same on the on the end, sorry. So this way we have added the sound, and it will be nice to add a little bit more atmosphere to this, because we have moving clouds, we're in the mountains, and it's just nice if there's some wind. And finally I need the text, and this new photo file, it's basically a text I created. Oops, somehow I need to redo this. So again, let's drag this down and drag it to a new video track here. So what this is, it's a little animated text which I created using Blackmagic Fusion, which is also a free tool. And if you download Davinci 15, it will actually be part of the software. So you'll have another tab down here which is called Fusion. If you're using Davinci 14, you will download it as a separate tool. And this tool is a very mighty tool for creating animations, 3D effects and stuff. And I like to use it to create animated text like this one. And it's just a video file with a transparent background, and as with the others, I have to resize it and reposition it. So I want it at the bottom here, make it a little smaller, and just right here. And if we now play this, you'll see that there's a little animation. I have to reposition it a little bit more, just like this. So there's a little animation going, then it's the text. It stays there for a while and then it's animated out again. And yeah, I'll not show you in this tutorial how this text is created, because it would just be too long. It's quite complex, and yeah, Fusion is a whole topic of itself, but there are many tutorials. So if you just Google for Blackmagic Fusion text, you'll find lots of tutorials which show you exactly how to create such a text. Or if you don't want an animated text, you can just use one of the titles here on the lower left. So there are several text effects. You could use a static text, have it fade in, fade out, so very simple. But I'll stop here and proceed with the last step, which is to export the video so we can post it on Instagram. And for this, I go down here to the Deliver tab, and there I just use this custom setting and go through the different tabs here. So you have video, I go with MP4, H.264, and the audio is AAC 192, and then I use a title, Instagram showcase, and yeah, that's it. But not really, because I have to show you two other settings which are very important if you're using Windows 7. So if you remember in the beginning, we were using, let's reset this, 1080 versus 1920. So this was our vertical aspect ratio. And on Windows 7, the H.264 encoder doesn't work for this. So for some reason it's limited. I haven't found out why, but what I found out is if I just export with a maximum height of 1080 and 608 width, this works with a restriction. Another thing which is important, I have to set the quality to restrict to, so not the automatic setting. And yeah, that's a little annoying. So if you're using Windows 7 and Davinci Resolve, there are some settings which don't work in the export tab. So if you use the export, it will just show error during encoding. So you have to work around this. And as long as you're doing full HD videos, you're usually fine. And for this vertical here, I'm going with a maximum height of 1080 and also restrict the quality to a maximum bitrate here, and then I'm fine. And on a little cell phone, this will work good. So last thing, I add this to the render queue and I start the render. And now it will render out the frames. You'll see the little preview here. And once it's done, I can put it to my cell phone and post it on Instagram.